Hello, Donnie. Thank you for being a part of the dialogue series to kickstart
Well,
for the Stockholm's participation in this year's Conscious Cities Festival, the Person-Space Continuum.
thank you. That was a long intro. Hi, it's great to be here. It's fantastic. I'm really happy to be here. Great to be online with you, and I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Great. Well, your journey through ICT and food tech innovation, mentoring startups, and catapulting ideas into action is inspirational. Well, it was only natural to find these overlaps between your work and what we do at the CCD and to bring these exciting overlaps into fruition.
Yeah.
And of course, all of that adds to sort of kickstarting the new Conscious City chapters that is Stockholm. Cool. Well, I'm increasingly curious about the what, the why, and the how of you are an enabler of ideas. So if you can tell me what specific aspects of your lived experience, education, or professional work really led you to be a business development coach and innovation strategist?
Okay. Well, I mean, that's sure. But of course, there's an easy answer to that. Not the, I mean, the thing is that I usually say that, you know, the future is always a haze and the past is always a very clear path.
Mm-hmm.
You can always see the red thread to, oh, I came to be here because,
Yeah.
but that doesn't mean that I, like 30 years ago, was sitting going, in 30 years time, I'm going to be an innovation strategist at KDH. I had no idea.
Mm-hmm.
I think that a couple of things that have influenced me to end up where I am today is one, of course, family and parents. I grew up in a family. My father was a surgeon, doctor. My mother was a midwife. My grandfather was a headmaster at school. My great-grandfather was a priest. I think, you know, the whole calling, not academic, but, you know, the whole calling thing to do something in a larger context than yourself has always been a big part of my family. However, I never really found my calling as such. I remember I asked my father when I was 16, and I asked him, okay, Dad, should I become a doctor like you? And he said, well, you know, the answer is, if you need to ask me that question, the answer is no.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Of course, I was 16. I didn't understand anything. It took me like 15 years to get what he said, but now,
Mm-hmm.
God rest his soul, you know, I understand what he means. So that's, you know, that's one big part that I think that I enjoy working in a larger context to serve and help and be of use somehow. I mean, that's part of my DNA, I think.
Mm-hmm.
That's one thing. The second part is the more practical part, and that comes down to school. Most of the first part of my schooling was okay. The last part, like, high school and college, completely, excuse the expression, sucked. It was the worst thing ever. I didn't almost even get out of school the first time around, because I wasn't a bad kid. Everybody liked me. I was a nice kid. I was probably a lazy dreamer, kind of somewhere else person that didn't really spend enough attention to what I was supposed to be doing. And since the educators had such a crappy method of trying to teach us stuff, yes, I just didn't, I wasn't motivated. It wasn't fun. And sometimes I look at my scorecards from when I was a kid, and they're like really strange. I have like straight A's in all of the subjects that I liked. And then I had, completely flunked everything that I didn't like. It was nothing in the middle. Everything was like, black and white. So after school, back then in Sweden, there was a compulsory military service. So everybody did their, a year of army service. So I did my, you do the tests and you do both physical and the score tests as well. And I go in there to the guy and he says, so what do you want to do for your year? And I said, oh, I don't know, drive a truck or something, or, or whatever. So, I mean, I'm still in that sort of, that mood, the late teenage mood of blah, blah. And he goes, nah, Oh yeah, and by the way, and then I've sort of spent the last 3-4 years at school being told that I'm kind of useless at everything because my grades are bad, and so then you get to the point where you think that why should I even try, because I'm not going to make them, it's not going to work anyway. So then you sort of fail out of that. So I come to this guy and he looks at me and he says, and I say, oh, I'll just drive a truck or whatever. And he goes, no, not with these scores. You're not going to drive a truck. And I go, oh, I can't even drive a truck. Am I that bad? And I go, no, opposite. I mean, we're sending you to officer school. This, you're off the charts here. We're gonna, yeah. So then they send me off to that sort of place, which I had no idea what's going on. And I enjoyed it was great. It was the greatest time of my life, because suddenly I was surrounded by people who wanted to achieve the same thing, and educators who wanted me to learn something, because I had to learn it for a cause, even though you could talk about the cause in itself, but and then I didn't have anything to do. I mean, my big dream was to become a car designer and apply for university, but my grades were so bad then, so I couldn't apply for university anyway. So they said, well, why don't you continue and continue in the service, and we can you can go officer school and you can study and everything. I said, hey, I don't have anything else to do. So then I did. So then I spent almost 9 years in the Swedish Army as an officer in the engineers, where I got my very practical engineer training. So I'm an army engineer in training. So if you ever need anybody to sort of, tell you how much an ice will carry, if you can drive a tank over the ice or not, or if you need to blow up a bridge, if by any chance you need to ever do that, or you can phone me, because I can probably give you the calculations of how much to use and where to put it. So yeah, so that was and in that, I've also found the joy of teaching and learning in that, because suddenly I was set to teach people, conscript soldiers who came in for their year, men and women, who did not want to be there. So I was trying to teach people something they didn't want to learn in an environment where they didn't want to be.
Yeah.
And my whole take of it was I have met these 150 people, once every new year when it started up again. And my only message was to them was, okay, you're here for a year, like it or not. It's not going to get better if you get up every day and decide it's going to be a shitty day. Yeah. So let's just try and make the best year out of it as possible. I'll do my best to make your year as knowledgeable and fun and useful as possible if you give me the chance. And that usually worked really well. So, and then I also understood when I was, because we do a lot of learning in that, you every other year you go to another year for Officers Academy in the next step, and you in your rank and everything like that. So I studied so much leadership and so much psychology and so much how motivation actually works, what makes people tick. Some things that I still see the civilian life is severely lacking. I'm not like, this was like 30 years ago. Come on, catch up, for Christ's sake. It's so many things that I realized that this is what it's all about. And this is what I want to do. I want to teach. I want to work with people. I want to work with development. I want to help see people grow. And that was sort of another part of it. And then when after 9 and 10 years, me and my sister decided to starting our own companies. And then we just started the first thing, and that was so much fun with our own thing. So the whole startup-y kind of entrepreneurship, running a business kind of thing became a big thing as well. And then in that, I just started working in the interface between academia and business and helping people. And that's sort of been there for the last 20 years, I guess. And then 10 years ago, I came to KTH to help start this new thing called KTH Innovation, which today, a number of years later, is going kind of well. We're doing fine. We're like, top 3 or 4 in the world. So that's okay.
Well, that's splendid. If that's not a definition of innovation, I don't know what can be. Well, with that as the bedrock.
That was the short, that was in a nutshell, the answer
In a
to your
nutshell.
question. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes. In a nutshell. Yeah. And building upon that,
Yes.
I want to know, what do you really think the nature of innovation in the design industry can be, especially
Yeah.
since design is technically less of a sector or a discipline, but it's more of an approach or a process of problem solving. How do you think innovation can happen in that?
I think, I mean, the thing is, I think that we're talking about a lot of things that tend to be mixed up and some things that should be mixed up, but they aren't. I think that the problem occurs when we separate the idea of design from, when we separate form and function.
Mm-hmm.
I'm breaking it down in a way too broken down way, but if we say, tech over here and design over here as a, and when they exist as their own entities, that's when we keep on going wrong all the time, because we get design with no function, and we get function with no design and no form, which Apple maybe 20 25 years ago, they started sort of in the tech world revolutionizing what a tech gadget could look and feel like. Yeah. For the consumers. Okay, so this has been going on for, I know, a long time. I mean, Raymond Loewy, the father of industrial design and everything he did in the 50s and 60s, of course. But I think that the symbiosis of form and function is really, really important. Mm-hmm. And I think that as a designer, and UX is a great example of something which I am happy came into life, because we had UI, which was only design, and then we had the coders, which was only code, and set to themselves, none of them actually made anything really work for a consumer. But when entered with the whole sort of idea of UX as a user experience, when we're talking about form and function, that's suddenly when we get a symbiosis of two things that actually make it makes it not only pleasurable to use, but it makes it intuitive to use, and it works because we've thought about the function as well. And this is something that I think that we see today in a large extent in everything from cars and houses and kitchens, and everything is suddenly becoming more practical, and things like that. But I mean, but of course we have a long way to go, because we're still stuck in so many old ruts where we think that something has to be a certain way because it's always been like that, but it's only probably been like that for the last 50 years. So that's not always. Mm-hmm. So, everything can be observed in a critical manner with your head to the side and go, well, couldn't we do this in a different way? And couldn't we change this to something better? Mm-hmm. And what if? I mean, I love the what if question. I mean, I can do what if about anything and just say, but just what if? And the thought is free, and we're allowed to think, what if we could do this? Yeah. Maybe the answer is, that's a bad idea. Okay, well, fine. Let's then not do it. I mean, one of the biggest problems with companies' innovation or innovative things is that they are so afraid of new ideas, because they say to people, oh, come up with it. No, let's not encourage people to be too creative, because then they might come with lots of ideas and then they will never get any work done. Yeah, but there's a big difference of getting the work done today that will pay my salary tomorrow, and thinking about how it could be on change in the long term. But they can't separate those different thought processes. And I think that if they come up with lots of ideas, we have to do them. Otherwise it won't, and that's going to break everything. So let's not come up with new ideas. And, so it's always either or. And that's why they go wrong all the time. I'm sorry about rambling on. I'm talking about different things here, but coming back to sort of your question, I think that the concept of design is super, super, super important. If we intend to create anything that anybody else is supposed to use, be it a consumer or a business, if anything is designed to be used by any kind of person, design has to be there. Because it's not, and design isn't only, it looks nice. Design is, do they understand which button to push? Do they, that's, everything goes into that design. So design is really important, but it will never exist as itself, as its own entity. It will always be connected to function. So form and function has to come together. And that goes for everything that we are designing, be it something we are looking at or using, or companies or cars or houses or anything, needs to be sort of, you know, put together and rethought.
Yeah, I mean, that should.
I mean, okay. Here's an example. Here's an example. Sorry for. I'm sorry. You just press me mute when you want me to shut up. I can, you know.
No.
But here's an example. I mean, I've been doing talks for audiences on like creativity and innovation for like many years. And one thing I've been saying for so many years is that, what if your smartwatch was connected to a heart rate monitor, and then one day there's a ring on the door and there's a nurse saying, "Hi, Donnie, I'm here for your cardiac arrest, which will happen in 65 seconds." Oh. I was like, "Oh, wow, you mean, yeah, your watch told me you're going to have a cardiac arrest in 65. Oh, sorry, 45 seconds. Would you mind lying down so I can attach the strings to the things?" And everybody goes, "Ha, ha, ha, ha," which is, of course, is a joke. But then, you know, fast forward a couple of years of me doing that example, Apple Watch connected to the Stanford Heart Study. So they're actually sending your heart rate to the cloud, and it will actually be able to at least give you a message and say, "Hey, there's an anomaly here in your heartbeat. Would you just check this, please?" So suddenly we are not, it's Donnie joking about something. And then like a couple of years later, we're actually seeing it happen. And then my next part of the joke is, well, you love Apple products, right? You have the iPhone, you have the iPad, you have the Air book, and you like Apple, and you like the form and the function, and they do things nicely. Well, and you have the watch and it's connected to your heartbeat. Well, why don't you go to an Apple clinic, not for your iPhone, but for yourself? What if Apple opened clinics and applied the same Apple design thinking, user interface, look and feel to the clinic as you come into a clinic and you're greeted? Just instead of they're saying, "Oh, can I look at your iPhone, please?" They'll say, "Oh, can I look at you, please?" I'd say, I'm half joking here, but most people would say, "I'll buy that." They already have my credit card. They know everything about me, they know more about my health than my doctor does. And heck, they know me. So I'll go to that. That's not a big leap to imagine. And you can do the same thought example of everything when it comes to like any brand, like cars or people who will build houses that could build other things, or people that build cars that could build other things. And it's so many, you can, but we're stuck in no, that's never going to work because we've always done this and we can't do this. But if you just put form and function together, you can apply it to almost anything.
Yeah, I wonder, if that particular example were to be extended to the built environment. You did mention someone who makes houses. If you had to just run wild with it, what would you do?
Say cities today are in a terrible state because they're
yes.
But look at Stockholm. It's chaos. Because there's 14,500 electric scooters in Stockholm. We have the highest number of scooter per capita, I think, in the world, or at least in Europe, because there's this kind of, we don't really know how to regulate this. And we have some politicians who actually really like the scooters, so they're not so super adamant in getting them out of there. And that's a typical example when it suddenly, we had this virus kind of thing spread there was no symbiosis between what we as citizens and the city wanted and what was offered. And, the cancer ate itself into us faster than we could combat it. So that kind of thing. So, and even though I've said my fair share of things about electric scooters, and I've written things about LinkedIn about them as well, but they're here to stay. In some kind of form, they're here to stay. Not in the form they are today, because that's not going to work. But one could at least imagine that. And again, there's been so much talk about we need to pave the way, both literally and figuratively, for bicycles in cities. we need to do this. And then in Stockholm and in most Swedish cities, they've done this kind of, we've painted some lines over there and you can bike over there. But in Stockholm, it's like a adventure race. Who survives wins kind of thing. We have 2 crossings in Stockholm where people die every week. I mean, it's no joke. It's great. It's crazy. Which is it makes me just so annoyed that they just don't say, okay, let's focus on sustainable cities and bicycles, and let's move the cars out of city center and move the people into city center, and then we'll repave the waves here, bikes here. I mean, I've been to South America when I've been traveling pre-pandemic, and it was a Sunday morning. I woke up and I was in the center of the city, and there was silence. Because I'd come there on the Friday, and it was like a bustling traffic and traffic jams and everything. And then I woke up on a Saturday or Sunday morning, and it turns out that they close off the city center every Sunday, a whole center and a huge road, and everybody's out walking or biking and just strolling around the city, and it's car free for the whole day. And that city, compared to Stockholm, we'd say, they're underdeveloped. And Stockholm is much more developed, but in some senses they are way ahead of us, because if you said to a politician, I wanted to close down Stockholm every Sunday, they go, oh, no, we can't do that. What will happen to commerce? What will happen to all the stores in the town and everybody then? But you can hardly drive in town anyway, so it's not that we're gonna, And another horrible thing I read was the amount of space allocated for parking houses in the center of Stockholm as compared to living quarters is also completely off. So I mean, we're still living in a 60s thing where the car is king and everything revolves around the car, like American city that was built around a feeder road, and then everything was built for the car. The car built America. Same thing in Stockholm, where like Sergels Torg, perfect example. Sergels Torg, the center of Stockholm. Mm-hmm. You have this big square. I mean, that is the center part of Stockholm, and the cars are driving on top, and the people are on the bottom level underground. And I'm going, why isn't the other way around? Why aren't the cars under and the people above in the sunlight? Yeah. I mean, that's just a typical example of 60s design, which went wrong.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry, we're talking about different things now. You please ask me a question. Otherwise, I'll just go off on a tangent and talk about.
No, that's exactly the kind of innovation we need, right? The kind of innovation that takes existing modes of mobility and transport and transfers them to human mobility, and then leads the way to city making based on that. That would change everything. And I wonder if more people started doing this, especially car companies, started thinking like this and started just steering their money a little away from their cars and maybe onto people's feet in some way.
Car company. I mean, we've been working at KTH. We've been working with, things like ride sharing. I think the first researcher who came to me with a ride sharing algorithm was in 2012 or 2011, when he'd written his paper on how many cars could we, throw out if everybody shared a car.
Yeah.
But then, of course, that's not counting the cultural aspect of that. People don't want to share a car. Cars are still, in some social layers and in some cultures, the car is still a significant marker for who you are and where you are. Exactly. So owning your own car it has nothing to do with transport. It's got nothing to do with mobility. The car stands still 97% of all the time. 3% of the car's lifetime it's being used. 97% of a car in the big city car, it's standing still in a garage. But that's where we go wrong again. And now we're talking about the fundamentals of innovation. Everybody out there, you cannot apply the thinking of, we're talking about cars and it's like inner city mobility. So if everybody just shares cars, it's all cool. Yeah, but then you've completely disregarded the whole social aspect of owning a car. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You cannot just disregard that, because for some people, it is their identity that they've finally managed to get a car that they've dreamt of. And today in 2021, yes, still in some cultures and some layers, it is super important to have that car. to signal. And it doesn't matter that they don't drive it. They don't care about driving it. They just want to own it and sit in it once every Sunday afternoon. And you have to, and in any kind of innovative process, those are the factors you have to factor in, because otherwise you'll reach an adoption threshold, which is impossible to come over, because that you'll hit your head into the wall every single time. It doesn't matter if your idea is better or cheaper or faster. If there's no cultural fit, it's never going to work.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Yeah, I come from India, and of course, cars are a part of our work, like the first paycheck, building up to it till we can actually afford it. Yeah, absolutely. And of course, there's so much money pumped into not just automation research, but also like making cars more eco-friendly, getting new ways to fuel it, or the electric cars. And of course, the design of a car itself doesn't make it less appetizing to people, isn't it? They're getting more and more sexy every year. So
yeah, but and another the thing. Here's another thing. Here's another secret to anybody who wants to ever innovate or come up with a new idea. Here's something that you never think about. Just because you come up with a new idea doesn't mean that the people you are trying to compete against, they're not going to say, oh, okay, Donnie had a better idea. I'm going to close down my company. I'm going to stop doing business. And here you go, Donnie. It's all yours. That's not how it works. It's going to go, I'm going to hang on to this as long as I can. And we're going to squeeze every cent out of this thing until it's... And that's what the car industry and the oil industry and every industry always does. That's how it works. People won't just go, oh, there's a better idea out there. We'll stop doing what we're doing. That's never going to happen. We're trying to, it's a survival. It's a lot of money. You know, it's not going to go, and that goes for every big, and the bigger shift you're trying to achieve, the more money you're going up against. And especially if you mixed in any kind of cultural aspect into that, I'm not going to say you're doomed to fail, but you've got a upward Mount Everest hill to climb. So we've climbed Mount Everest, so we've proved that that's possible. Every hill is climbable. Some are just a lot steeper and a lot higher than others. But hey, don't underestimate the enormous, the shifts you're trying to achieve. And it's when people say, oh, we're going to change this and we're going to change it. Well, good. Every change starts with a small motion of something. Yes. But you need to understand what you're up against, not to become delusionized and stop, but to pace yourself so you don't burn out the first year, because it's going to take 10 or 15 years. And to pace yourself so you do the right things in the right order, and you attack it from different places, and you cannot just we can talk about this a long time, but yeah.
No, that's true, because this gets me thinking about my generation. We are different. We would like to be different, and we definitely.
This is where she called me old. Okay, fine, I get it.
A little bit. You're more.
Okay.
Of course.
I'm fine with that. Yeah.
Right. So the thing is, people from our generation especially are thinking more and more about social reform. And
yes.
That's of course an important buzzword even in the world of business, right? Social entrepreneurship. And you have been leading Entrepreneurs Without Borders. And I'm pretty sure there are ways, or there are challenges there when you talk about the mountain, this steep mountain. I think the mountain just becomes upright. How do we even climb that? Social entrepreneurship, design, innovation, and even addressing questions of, if you take mobility, for example, it's almost like a cartel, right?
Yeah.
The fuel industry, then there's automobile design industry, then there's a tech industry, and of course, everything tied back to urban planning, which is again, a lot of money, right? So how social entrepreneurship, how do we move towards that?
I think that, okay, now we're entering some really interesting ground here. And I think that it's important, again, you need to acknowledge sort of how the world works, and again, not to become delusionized and not to stop doing what you're trying to do, but the whole just basics, know your enemy, that kind of thing, it's, or know what you're up against. Like take social entrepreneurship, for instance, it's for many, if we can compare social entrepreneurship with the climate movement, 30 years ago, the climate movement was lots of hippies driving around in Volkswagen buses, which was kind of, the irony, of course, is that the environmental people always drove the most polluting cars, but that's a different joke. But they were never taken seriously. And they were always, they were always telling us, the rest of the world, that they were good and we were bad. And it was all about that we had to, it was this blame thing. But the big shift in the whole environmental movement came when it shifted from the blame game to a more positive approach. So it was more about that you can actually be part of doing good things, do more of the good stuff and less of the bad stuff. And that changed the whole approach. This was like 15 years ago. Social entrepreneurship is kind of going through the same thing where it's for a long, long time, you've had social entrepreneurship over here, like 3% of everybody. And they've had this thing that, it's only for good and it's non-profit and we don't want to talk about money. And it's like, the sitting around the campfire singing Kumbaya and everything is fantastic and everybody's, but then, and so they're making a small change, a small place, but they're actually not affecting anything big because nobody really takes them seriously. And on the other hand, you have all of not the social entrepreneurs, but the entrepreneurs that are making all of the money and they're getting all of the investments and they're, building these fast-paced big companies and da-da-da. And then like 5 or 6 or 7 years ago, a number of people started entering the social entrepreneurship scene and adding the economic aspect to it. Like in Stockholm, we have Narayana, it's one example, and then a number of other places. And what then they did two things. One, they proved the point that you can be socially oriented and also make money.
Yeah.
Which some of us have been trying to say all along, but we haven't had the voice. But more importantly, they managed to sort of with their sort of Trojan horse of startup-y kind of economy, they sort of moved social entrepreneurship into the fine dining halls of the big money. And they said, we're doing some really cool tech startups here to save the world. And then with the right names and the right people and the right money. And then suddenly the floodgates opened and poured money into that. Yeah. So they disguised it as, good business, and I'd say that any sort of shift in technology or newer thinking, starts off with, you always have, you both have the adoption curve, which is, early adopters and innovators and then mass market and laggards, that one. But you also have the hype curve, which is, everybody, fantastic. And then it goes down and then it suddenly, but I have my own sort of kind of curve, and it's not a curve in itself. It's just any kind of shift starts off with the people who are really enthusiastic about it. If it's tech, it's the engineers. And then what they do, and if it's any kind of design, it's like, hipsters or other crazy people who do weird stuff with beards and stuff before it becomes mass market. And now everybody has a beard. And then the hipsters stop having beards because everybody else have beards, because the early adopters never want to look the same as the mass market people. That's a challenge for marketeers. But anyway, what happens is that in tech, engineers build things because they can, and the only things that are built are things that do what the tech can do. It's got nothing to do what the tech should do. But once you start entering design, form and function into that equation, things start happening. And then when that suddenly falls into the lap of the marketeers and the management consultants and the business people, and they see that you can make money out of this, that's when things start happening. And that's when it takes off. Internet, mobile telephony, every single shift has followed the same kind of, I can give an example today. Voice services. For a long time, and I can argue still, voice kind of sucks. I mean, I cannot really have a conversation with my phone. I can tell it predefined commands.
Sure.
It might understand me.
Mm.
Half of the times it does not know what I'm saying. So, and if I look at what my telephone can do with voice commands, it's like, it's super sucky. I mean, I look at the tutorials. Here's how you control your voice, your telephone with your voice. And there's an example. And it's like, okay, Bixby. Oh, hey, Bixby. Or okay, Google. Turn on Bluetooth. And I'm going to myself, okay, show me one user case where I'm sitting at the dinner table with my family and going, hey, kids, let's turn on the Bluetooth. Come on. Hey, Bixby, turn on Bluetooth. I mean, that's not, I mean, that's stupid. That's it. But it's there because it can, not because it should. Yes. So I mean, voice, I'm waiting for the shift. Alexa's doing a good job, but I'm waiting for the shift from because we can to because we should.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's the shift there. So, and that shift is everywhere. And that's the same with social entrepreneurship, where we're sort of kind of in the middle of something happening where people are saying we should for many different reasons, but it's not until that one reason we can make a lot of money here. That's when the world will turn.
Yeah, yeah.
Now we're seeing it in fossil, where investors are actually shying fossil investments because long-term, it's a bad deal. Hands off. And then suddenly the oil industry is going, oh shit. You know, suddenly the big money is going, let's look at something green instead. Not because they have this huge, oh, we want to save the world. It's because they want to protect their investments.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So, and I'm not trying to be cynical. I'm just saying that with acknowledging that, you can find ways of working with your social change that will, one, make you profitable, and two, make you eligible to at least maybe not have dinner with them in their fine dining, but at least, you know, have coffee with them afterwards. Because that's when the big shift happens. That's when the big things happen. I mean, with Entrepreneurs Without Borders, we made the huge mistake of trying to enter ground where nobody was. And we made the, you know, it's the most basic startup mistake of all, going, oh, there's nobody here. It's perfect. No competition. Well, there's a reason there's nobody there, because there's nothing else there either. You know, it's like saying, oh, look at this place. Nobody has built anything here. This is where we're going to build our house. Yeah, but honey, it's a desert. You know, it's you know, that's why there's nobody here. But, you know, so when you see the four fielders and everybody's going, oh, here's four fields and here's all my competitors and we're only ones up here. I always go, why are you the only ones up there? That looks really scary. Why is nobody else there? Is there no competition? If there's no competition, then nobody wants it. So, you know, that's another aspect as well. So we made the mistake. We made that rookie mistake with Entrepreneurs Without Borders, because I had this vision about not running for the startup kind of things and not working with small things. I wanted to build scalable, sustainable, solid, good companies with 100 employees that could employ people for an honest day's work, for an honest salary, and they could support their families and they could go home happily and have a good life and build communities. So we were trying to get into between crowdfunding that lone person so they could start their own business and rise from poverty, which is over on one side, where you want a picture of that person on your refrigerator and say, I crowdfunded that person's goat. Perfect. And then on the other side, you have, you know, the next African unicorn, high-tech kids. Let's bring electric scooters to Nairobi and raise $1 billion. Perfect. And that's over here. And then in the middle, it's like sort of, let's just build a good business, okay? So we were there. But that's what we were trying to do, you know, help people grow sustainable businesses. And everybody was like sort of patting our back and saying, oh, awesome, fantastic, wow, a great idea. And nobody lifted a finger to help us because we were oh so boring. We were in a place where nobody understood what we were, how they could help us, because their mechanisms was either crowdfund that lone person or invest in that cool tech startup. And there was nothing in between. You know, there's no mechanisms to help that work. So we mistakenly took a position where we were very alone and it didn't work. So I mean, we've rethought that since then. But it's a really interesting aspect to think about when you are innovating. What are you trying to change, and what does a mountain look like, and how are you going to climb it? There's many ways to climb Mount Everest. One way is actually to rent a helicopter and land on the top, and then you're done.
I was just thinking exactly that. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Another way is blowing the whole thing up and just walking over it. But I mean, that's more radical approach. I mean, there's hundreds of ways of standing on the peak of Mount Everest. That doesn't include walking up past all the base camps. That's the normal way up.
Yeah, and from what you're saying, it looks almost like we have to understand what is and what if, but at the same time, manage to do all that we can and we should, and find a balance between all these four things.
Yeah. And I mean, the thing is, we have to do this. I mean, we're lagging behind with the SDGs after the pandemic. The world is bleeding and burning and everything else. Everything is upside down. So the world has never, ever, ever needed us, you, me, everyone to do something about it more than now. The biggest problem we have, of all of the problems that we have, is that whatever we try and do now, you know what? We have no idea if we're going to look back at this in 20 years and say, how could we be so stupid? How could we put the people underground and the cars overground? What were we thinking? You know? And in 20 years, we'll be looking back on what me and you were talking about today in social entrepreneurship and SDGs and everything. And we'll go, oh, well, that was a good idea. Whew, not. So, but we don't know, but we have to try, you know, and at least try and learn from what's gone before and look around and open your eyes and you know, just and try.
But then, yeah, just going back to the SDGs for a second.
Yes.
Goals. There's no roadmap.
No, I've been saying that a long time now. I mean, if you look at how we work at KTH Innovation, I mean, we've developed our own tools to help early stage entrepreneurs build context around their idea so they can reach some kind of business start. We do it the other way around. We don't have any goals. We only have a roadmap.
Right. Yeah.
Where we measure your progress from 1 to 9. And when you're at 8, you're sort of, okay, well, now you're good enough to start, and then good luck, right? There's no sort of end goal. But the problem with the SDGs is that they're great. I mean, it's the first time we've ever agreed upon anything of that scale. So that's a good thing. But there's no map to get me to a goal. It's just a goal. It just says by 2020, which was like 2 years ago soon, or 2030, many of the goals are formulated like that. Like 2030, this and this is supposed, we are supposed to lower or increase or help. And if my entrepreneurs come to me and they say, okay, here's my roadmap, and my goal for the coming 4 months is to improve my pitch. I go, what do you mean improve your pitch? I can't measure that. What do you mean by that? It's not a quantifiable goal. Who's going to say, so you're going to come back to me in 4 months and say, my pitch is a lot better now. Says who?
Yeah.
You know? So if you, and that goes back to education. Yeah. There's nothing wrong with grades as long as they are connected to what I'm supposed to learn. And what I'm supposed to learn has to be relevant to my development. So some things are basic. Basic math. Okay, everybody needs to know basic math because math and algebra is kind of a basic thing for most things in the world. So just by knowing how to multiply and divide and add up is something good. So everybody needs to learn that. And then on top of that, you can branch out. So, but coming back to goals and the SDGs, there is no roadmap. There's just some kind of goals. Many of them aren't quantified. Probably because they didn't want to quantify them, because then many people don't want to quantify a goal because they're afraid that, well, if people reach them, then they might stop. Yeah, but if you don't quantify them, then they'll never reach anything. Because then you never know. I mean, and that's another thing. If you're working with people, one of the best ways of getting people to be really deillusionized and feel really bad about themselves is to always make sure that they never reach any goals. Always make sure that they leave the office after a full day of work with a sense of unfulfilledness, that they didn't make it today either. And then you repeat that for 6 to 8 months, and then they're out. Perfect. That's the way that's the way to really squash your employees. On the opposite, if you give people achievements, goals, make them proud of what they have achieved today. I've done this today. This is what I've actually managed to do. We celebrate on a weekly basis that we've made it through another week, and look at what we did this week. It's fantastic. It's incredible. I give all of my startups here at KTH, I give them champagne goals. I tell them to tell me, give me the goal, the day. What are you going to reach? Which pinnacle are you going to reach? And then buy us all champagne. What is that? What is that goal? It has to be kind of big and hairy and audacious. It can't be sort of like just, oh, I got up this morning, champagne. No, I mean, that's kind of doesn't qualify. But you need something, because you need the quick wins and you need the epic wins. Gamification, for Christ's sake. Any good game is built on those two concepts. You have quick wins, you grind, you kill trolls, and you make some money, and then you buy a sword or whatever. And then you meet the boss on each level. Epic win, you beat the boss, you level up. But the combination of the quick win, the built-in, the quick win, the sense of continuous achievement with the big achievement, we made it. That's how you build good gamification into both games and life and people and leadership and startups and anything.
Yeah, I'm just
worried. So now, that was a long way away from the question, but anyway.
No, that makes sense, of course, like having a staggered approach to measuring impact, social impact. Like if I had to sort of put a nice phrase underneath whatever you just said, that's what I would put. And it just makes me wonder, what about people who are never satisfied with what they do? People who want to delay gratification mostly because they don't want to stay complacent. And that applies to a lot of entrepreneurs as I see them.
I mean, I'm that, but on the opposite kind of, I'd never say that. I'd never say that I'm never happy. I wouldn't say that, but I'm the person that when I'm finished with a project, I get depressed.
Oh,
because
exactly. I mean, you're done with it.
It's like, oh, what do I do now? What is it in my, what is left in my life to do? That kind of thing, you know? And that's, so I have the trouble of I'm always looking for new things to do, just to get some things going and try to achieve something new. And then I did that. So what do I do now then? And, you know, so constantly doing things. Yeah. So
that matches well with your profession.
But coming back to the SDGs, I think that one of the biggest problems is that we have SDG assessments. So you can look at something and say, yes, you are, or no, you're not. And then that's it. But there's no sort of degree of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We have our scales are 1 to 9. You're on a 1 and you're on your way to 9. And then you leave us when you're sort of at 8. But the thing is, you can look at every single step and say, okay, I'm at 3. 4 means this. Then I know what to do to reach 4. So, you know, we've built a scale of everything. We have a 6-dimensional tool that we work with. And I feel that we should be able to apply the same kind of thinking to the SDGs and sustainability as well, where we have, you know, a staggered approach to our development. So it's not just, oh, we're not doing well. Oh, we're not doing well. Oh, suddenly we reached the goal. You know, it's you know, we need some kind of scale roadmap. We need to, yeah, because otherwise it's really, really hard to know if you're doing it. And if it's only, you know, if it's only a constant strive towards something that you can never reach, you know, it's a hard thing. hard thing for people to understand and keep doing and understand why they're doing what they're doing, and yeah.
Well, okay, talking about roadmaps and where things can be in the future. Well, something about conscious Stockholm itself. Like, do you think Stockholm is a different city? Well, to begin with, for an entrepreneur. And if there's something very unique about the way research is done there, or designers practice, or decision-making happens, if there's anything different.
I mean, I think Stockholm is a fantastic city to work with new thinking and new ideas for many different reasons. I think that many people I meet who come to Stockholm from other countries, they are overwhelmed that they say, not me, you know, we take sustainability for granted. It's in everything we do. We talk about what's in it for the greater good, this community or social aspect of what we're doing. Is a big part of everything today. The environment for an entrepreneur, and I'm not making a difference between social entrepreneur because I don't make that difference, because all entrepreneurship should be social and sustainable. Because if we say social entrepreneurship, we're giving the others carte blanche to do whatever they want, and that's not good enough.
Right.
We need everybody to be socially oriented. And people go, so yeah, but I don't want to do education for kids in Africa. You don't have to. Sustainability is not targeting one goal and fixing that. Sustainability is looking at all of the goals and making sure that you're not breaking anything. That's more important, because that we can apply to the other 95% who don't call themselves social entrepreneurs. The ones that are calling themselves social entrepreneurs, they're the 5% that they're targeting sub goal 16.5 or whatever, The others are going, oh, whatever, I don't care about the SDGs. I just want to make money. That's fine, as long as you don't break anything of these 17 along the way. So that's why I say entrepreneurship should be sustainable all over the board.
Yeah.
And that's coming up a lot in Stockholm now, I think. Talking about impact entrepreneurship, we're talking about sustainable entrepreneurship. And of course, the joke being that you cannot throw an electric scooter without hitting an incubator. So, it's with 14,500 scooters and I don't know how many incubators and co-working spaces and entrepreneurship hubs and whatever we have, it's like an incredible thriving environment. And the social aspect is huge. So you have a lot of places that are, only focusing on that. You have Norrsken, you have Ekskäret, and lots of others that are, focusing, targeting, and really. And then we have the suburbs coming up a lot as well, which is great. We're getting a mix in from them as well, because previously it's been from the center of Stockholm out to Kista, which is one of the suburbs. It's been, 40 kilometers on the map, but 400 kilometers in culture. But it's actually, that's shortening now, because we're getting a mix of entrepreneurs from both sides, and slowly things are happening. But Stockholm is an incredible environment, but they need to I think they need to, the people in the city that run the city, they need to stand up for that they run the city, and they need to stop being so defensive and be afraid that, if we tell these startup entrepreneurs that run scooter companies that what to do, then they might be angry. So what? They're not going to leave the city. This is their biggest market, for Christ's sake. Put some demands up. Say that they cannot ride on, stop them from parking on the sidewalks. It's easy. You're in charge of the city. You're the boss. Decide. We want you to decide because you're the boss. That's what bosses do. Decide. Nobody likes a boss who's indecisive and doesn't come up and just stands in the corner going, I don't know, do whatever you want. That's never going to help anybody. Stand up for yourself and take care of the city and make it green and take some decisions and kick the cars out and bring the people in.